To thank all of you for coming this evening and welcome you here. I would also like to acknowledge that we are on Coast Salish territory and that many of us are visitors to this place. My name is Naomi Devine and I'm chair of the Victoria chapter of the BC Sustainable Energy Association, and I'd just like to take a minute to tell you a little about us. Our vision is a future in which all of BC's energy comes from clean, renewable, efficient sources for electricity, transport, and all other purposes, and in which BC becomes a net exporter of clean and renewable energy. Our organization is 95% volunteer run, and we have grown to over 700 members since our inception in 2004. We have a table outside, and I strongly encourage you to come and talk to our members afterwards and think about joining the organization, because it's people like you that make our organization strong. As for the length of the talk this evening, we're going to go till roughly about 8:30, and then afterwards Elizabeth is going to be available to sign books, and there's going to be her book for sale outside as well. And there will be time for questions too, which I'll moderate. So, now to introduce the person who you've come to see. Elizabeth May is an environmentalist, writer, activist, lawyer, and officer of the Order of Canada. She was executive director of the Sierra Club of Canada from 1989 until 2006, when she stepped down to run for the leadership of the Green Party of Canada. She's here tonight to speak on the consequences of the increasing development of Alberta's tar sands. So please welcome Elizabeth May.
Now I have to get wired. Thank you, Neil. Thank you to the Sustainable Energy Association of British Columbia for hosting this event. And I also want to acknowledge how indebted I am to Sierra Club of Canada as well for a lot of the research that I'm using and promoting in this discussion. There's all kinds of things going on that are vastly technical. Are we done? We all right? Okay. I'll draw a few things to your attention during the talk, but I'm particularly grateful that Public Interest Research Group here is part of the talk. It's one of the aspects of my high school years that I haven't never talked about publicly at all, but it was one of the projects that I undertook in grade 11 to start the first PERG in Connecticut. And Ralph Nader challenged Connecticut and Oregon to start what he called citizen action groups, which then morphed into being public interest research groups. And we had a wonderful fundraiser through 35 high schools in the Hartford area that I organized, and our traction was the wonderful Pete Seeger, who sang at the end of a long march. And we had one of those pledges where you pledge money per how many miles you're going to walk and so on. And we ended up having enough money to found the first PERG. So it's nice to be here and see the PERGs working across Canada and the British Columbia Sustainable Energy Association and the work of Sierra Club of Canada. I know there's some Sierra Club BC folks in the audience, and I certainly hope that all of you will seek them out and find ways to support them and join and support their work. This is, of course, Environment Week. Yesterday was World Environment Day, which is a day recognized by the United Nations as a day when globally we pay attention to what's happening on planet Earth. We are, of course, therefore 14 years exactly from the time when the world leaders gathered at Rio de Janeiro in Brazil for the Earth Summit. I'm sure many of you remember it. It was, to that point, the largest gathering of heads of government on the history of the planet, and gathered because the issues that were facing us were critical and urgent, and world leaders gathered there undertook a number of commitments. One of them was, of course, to alleviate world poverty, with many world leaders committing to the 0.7% target that donor nations would commit 0.7% of their GDP to overseas development assistance to alleviate global poverty. And embedded in Agenda 21, which was a key document agreed upon in Rio, although not a legally binding treaty, governments from around the world committed to efforts to provide technology transfer to developing countries to ensure that the technologies and the paths of development that the industrialized world had undertaken to become wealthy at the expense of global ecosystems would be avoided by developing countries. We used to talk about leapfrogging over the mistakes we made to a form of development for the poor of the world that would both alleviate poverty and reduce ecological footprint globally. At that moment of June 1992, exactly 14 years ago this week, we were also in eager anticipation of the day when the Cold War would end and we'd have a peace dividend. The 1990s were to be the turnaround decade, and our hopes were high and set on success in a number of fronts all at once. In addition to alleviating global poverty as a goal out of the Earth Summit, and in addition to the Convention for the Protection of Biological Diversity, one of the key agreements that came out of that meeting 14 years ago was the Framework Convention on Climate Change. And what I want to